start whenever you want.
Yeah? Okay. You're going to introduce or welcome everybody to HD Source?
I guess I could introduce you. I thought you were already popular.
I'll do that.
So,
I'll do that.
Well, folks, thank you for coming down today, and we have the pleasure of having Barry Cheong and Terry Crack here to talk about the Dedolight system. And take it away.
Hi. Once again, thanks for coming. I am working from notes so I don't get off track too much and get distracted, so that'd be a good thing. My name is Terry Crack. I am technically the president and CFO of a company called Flight Productions, which we also call Dedo Canada, and I am the exclusive importer / agent for Dedo fixtures, Dedolight, into Canada. HD Source is my principal broadcast dealer nationally, and it's nice of them to invite us here. I'm going to give you a brief technical background about essentially the reflective system. I have a personal opinion, which is, I don't know if anybody else has thought about this, but with the advent of LED lighting coming into the world at large, or with our industry, I think it really changed the way we contemplated light. And what I mean by that is pre-LED conventional light was pretty static in a way. We had your soft lights and your hard lights, and we had tungsten and you had HMI, and then the beams of light were bigger or smaller, but very similar, and it was very similar what people were doing with that light. And those lights really were around for a long time. A Fresnel lens is over 100 years old in the industry, and it's still the same lens today. I think the only modification that was made was we kind of went into what I like to call robot lights. They became moving lights, they became manipulated, they became computer driven, etc. But they didn't really change much what the physical light could do. They put a lot of stuff in one particular piece of equipment, but they were essentially the same lights. Then LED came along, and well, truth is LED when it first came out was so crappy, let's be honest, it was terrible. I remember looking at the first, and I'm using Dedo as an example, the first Ledzilla way back when, almost probably 20 years ago, and we turned it on and I looked at it with the fixture here, my hand here, and I went, oh, there's light, and I went like that, and I go, where was the light? Where'd it go? And I think what that led to was I think it became the start of people realizing that they've got to be completely innovative with lighting at this point in time. It started the idea that there was going to be a constant change and a working because it's no good. We have to go forward on this. And there's a desire now to improve it. And a couple of examples, LED very quickly went into bicolor. From monochrome to bicolor. The monochrome lights died so quickly in the industry, it's almost remarkable. There are still applications for it, some people still use it, but in spite of the cost differences, people wanted bicolor. Again, a Dedo example is when they went from panel lights, they went from individual LEDs to individual lenses on each of those LEDs to increase the output. The soft light in LED is incredible, what the variations on themes, all trying to make it better. And of course, we went from RGBW, which people, when it came out, thought that was an industry standard, and then they quickly went to RGBWW because they needed to put the white, cool white, and the warm white to do skin tones. This is constant. When CTV put their first LEDs into their studio, a long time ago now, in a year, they were down to about 75% output on the overall all of the lights. Nobody had any idea at the time, and I'm not trying to sort of blame whoever put that equipment in there. They didn't know. They didn't know what lumen maintenance was. Nobody had any idea that it would deteriorate that quickly. A lot of that stuff's gone behind us. So back just the one statement, we're now in a great world of lighting because it's changing all the time. It's not just the LEDs are not getting better, But the whole idea of light, I think, is changing. There's another sidebar to all of this, which I call the greening of the film industry. A couple of years ago, UCLA did a study of the carbon footprint in industry in Los Angeles. And I've heard sort of varying themes, but next to the aerospace industry, the worst for the carbon footprint was the film and video industry in LA. They were a huge carbon footprint. And there is now a movement, and unnecessarily so, to get more green in what we do. What does this have to do with this? I'll get that in a second. But now, big studios in LA, if you don't prove to them that you are considering and working to a more green environment and to a smaller carbon footprint, you won't necessarily get the gig. And it's as simple, for instance, on a common level, if you will, you know, you go to LA and you know what you won't find anymore? You won't find bottles, plastic bottles full of water. Gone, right? Easiest thing in the world. Get rid of it because it's just junk. Dado was always green. We didn't know we were green, but we were green. Way back when. What was his mantra? Was small lights, increased outputs. Lumens per watt. He was always that way. We just didn't know enough to call it green. So what we have here is a system which is not only creative, but it is also, I think, green, and I personally think that's important. I'm going to go back to the beginning for a little bit and look at where Dado started. And Dado started with optics. And since this is mostly about optics, we'll just do a quick overview of this. Dado had his incredible flood to spot ratio in his old tungsten lights. Most of you know this. I'm assuming most of you know the product. When we moved to LED lights, we ran into a problem, and that problem was none of the lenses translated from tungsten or HMI into LED. So they had to reinvent all of the lensing. Not only did it not translate into LED, the lensing didn't translate between monochrome LED and bicolor LED. So, and then they were also different variations and going up in size, which made for an incredible, a lot of work, basically. So this is a Turbo 7 with an imager on it. And we're back to Dado's original precision lighting, which is what he's well known for. A little sidebar, what a lot of people don't know with this lighting is that looks horrible, but this is built into the, but most people don't know that you have the ability to do macro with that same imager, which is new compared to the other imagers. And I think this goes along with the term that we've been using, which is called light shaping, which is kind of a cheesy marketing thing. But anyway, you have the other imager, which has an incredible ability to, and I don't have the attachment because my order from Germany was late, but you can also soften the filters, which can be used on eyes, product shots, and things like that. Mostly, it's optics that I'm showing you. I want to talk at the beginning of Lightstream, which is really what we're here to talk about. Lightstream did start with the CRLS, Cine Reflect Lighting System, a number of years ago, where there was a marriage between the people that were creating reflectors, and they went to Dado to create a light that was serviceable, which was a parallel beam light. Just like to show you a quick little 2-minute video on this because it's a good explanation of what the core of the parallel beam is. That's the wrong video. Hang on a sec. This is the correct video.
We did a movie at Astra. It's a James Gray film, and with Hoyt van Hoytema is the director of photography, and he had a request that we find a very specialized lamp, or that we create a very specialized lamp that was a parabolic lamp that actually was parabolic and didn't have a big hole in the center. And Hoyt was very concerned that in scenes that we had to have the sun, that it be a parallel beam and not a spreading beam. David and Dado brought down the PV70. We tested it in camera tests at Camtech prior to the show, and it was exactly what we were looking for. A perfectly parallel and even light that replicated the sun. The beam is fantastic. That's the first great thing about it. It's a 1200 HMI. You can plug it into the house. When we tested mole beams, we tested 18Ks, we bounced lamps into mirrors, we did everything we could think of, and nothing compared to the PV70. It's a perfect parallel beam, turns on and off, hot free strike, no problem, dims, DMXable, throw it around, and the quality of light's unbelievable. We use 4 of them at all times through the windows as the sun. As often as possible, pushing as far back as we can to cover as much area as we can. And it does exactly what it was supposed to do, and it has made our life very, very easy.
So that was the light that they created to work with the first Cine reflect lighting systems, 70 centimeters, which is where they get the name. It is an HMI, it's not an LED, it's a standard fixture, but the key is the parallel beam. And the parallel beams really go hand in hand with the reflectors systems. So the reflector systems start with 4. This is where you're going to watch out for a second. We have 4 reflectors numbered 1 through 4, and they are the number 1 reflector is right there. Sorry about that. And if you can see, oops, this is reflector 1 is really designed just to redirect the physical light. It's not a mirror, but it sort of behaves like a mirror. A mirror won't reflect parallel light rays, basically. It won't do. Will do it. It's got a 95 to 98% light reflection, if you will. So the loss is very little, and as you can see, it's pretty even. It's pretty normal, or not normal, but it's basically redirecting the light, and that's it. The second reflector is number 2, which has a 12-degree angle of exit. So it's got a 12-degree angle of exit. I'm going to come up here because it's going to be a little bit better. 12-degree angle of exit. It's in fact reflecting the same amount of light, okay? So it's 95 to 98% reflected light. Because it's spreading it over a larger surface, of course, it doesn't look as bright. But, so the third reflector, the number 3, is a 50% spread factor on it. Once again, technically it is reflecting the same amount of light, but spread over even larger area. And we get the number 4, which is a 95% spread of light. They do liken this to a piece of whiteboard or a piece of styrofoam. Will do almost the same in terms of beam spread and reflecting light. What I don't think a piece of styrofoam does is quite create the same kind of quality of light, but that's a subjective thing, obviously. So that's the core of what Lightstream is. You put the reflectors with the parallel beams, and you have that's what it is. We've talked about this before, and for those of you who are familiar with other forms of reflected light, the original CRLS or the light bridge systems, this four reflective surfaces are industrial products that are available over the counter in Europe. They're originally designed for warehouse lighting distribution. And this particular bracket here is also an industrial product that's available. What is the difference between reflectors is not necessarily the surface, but it's how it's mounted and the locking devices, okay? So any of you that have been involved with other forms of reflectors 1 through 4, they work equally as well. They're just as good. Mine are cheaper, but they are good reflectors. So we're not sort of hiding from that fact. What's interesting about reflective surfaces this cheats the square law. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the cheating of the square law. What happens is when this light, first of all, everybody knows the square law, right? Okay, so we have this light. Let's just move it up to sort of make it less obtrusive. Okay, the light is X number of centimeters from the reflector. The reflector is reflecting that way. So, in a normal circumstances in lighting, this would be the light source. In other situations, the fixture itself would be the light source. However, in the reflected system, because of the parallel beam and because of the angle of exit, which in a parallel beam is 2 to 4%, the virtual light source becomes where the vectors come back from the fixture, where they intersect back here. That distance plus that distance becomes the virtual light source, which is important, as we all know, because of the closer, double the distance from the light, a quarter of the light on the subject, it can change very quickly, which was always dado's strength. You could put it into a spot, you could throw it way back, and giving the talent lots of room to move, right? Because you're not affecting it. I've got a quick short video on that to show you.
My favourite lighting equipment is made by Dedolight. I've been using Dedolight Lightstream to light high-profile interviews for TV. This is my Lightstream interview kit. Everything I need to light creatively with reflected light is in this small wheelable case. Lightstream is a two-part system consisting of a parallel beam light source and special reflecting surfaces that reflect over 90% of light. Now, Lightstream shouldn't be confused with simple bounce light. Reflected light is so much more. Taking a step back, here's a typical interview lighting setup I've used before Lightstream came along. The backlight is a Dedolight 3. The background projection is a D-LED 7 with DP1 imager and FX glass. and the key light is a Dedolight Filoni panel with honeycomb. Let's change the Filoni key to a Lightstream key. The Lightstream reflector is now in the same position as the Filoni key was, 2 meters from the subject. Although the reflector is still 2 meters away, the light source is now over there, 3 meters away. So the total distance from fixture to subject is now 5 meters. Because of this greater distance from the light source to the subject, we minimize the effect of the square law. Put simply, the subject doesn't get brighter as they lean forward towards the reflector. With the original key light back in place, you can see the subject becomes overexposed as they lean closer to the light source. Using Lightstream removes this problem. The Lightstream light source is a Dedolight D-LED 7 with a parallel beam intensifier. The parallel beam intensifier is where the magic happens. Used on focusing Dedolights, it creates a near parallel beam of around 4 degrees. It also increases the light output dramatically. For example, the output of this tiny D-LED 3 light is increased more than 8 times when using the 610 intensifier. The light reading without the intensifier is 1500 lux. With the intensifier, it becomes 13,000 lux, which is 8.6 times more light. The beauty of Lightstream is that one light source can feed multiple reflectors. Here, a second reflector redirects some of the light from the key light beam to the backlight reflector. Controlling the beam intensity is easy. Simply move the reflector in or out of the source beam. Lightstream reflectors have high-tech surfaces that reflect up to 98% of light when used with parallel beam intensifiers. Reflector 1 is primarily used to redirect light to another reflector. Exit beam is very narrow. Number 2 has a wider exit beam of 12 degrees, useful as a backlight. 3 is even wider at 50 degrees, so covers a larger area. Number 4 has the widest exit angle, 95 degrees. It reflects very gently like a polystyrene board. Sliding reflector locks with articulating arms enable precise reflector positioning. The absolute best part of lighting with Lightstream is the quality of the light it delivers. Lightstream reflectors give a beautiful, diffuse light that sometimes gives skin tones a slightly velvet appearance.
This case has become my principal interview lighting kit. It's compact and contains everything I need to give me the Lightstream look.
That's a pretty interesting kit he's put together with using the old Dado backpack case. So I just want to reiterate a little bit about the parallel beams and adapters or intensifiers. We started calling them adapters and then they changed it to intensifiers. They are, any light will work on a reflector, obviously, as long as it's got a certain amount of hardness to it. If you get too soft, it'll hit a reflector and nothing will happen. So it's not that you couldn't use a normal LECO or a normal, any kind of light, as you know, a flashlight for that matter. The parallel beams are specifically designed, and once again, we're back to an optics that it is really the strength of our core product, if you will. A parallel beam is when all the light rays are traveling in sync to each other, right? They're all the same parallel. Hence a laser, which is an incredibly, sort of powerful version of that. Most other lights or older lights are more of a divergent beam, which is why they don't get the same kind of power. These reflectors, once again, as are the lenses inside the fixtures, they are specific to each individual focusing light. Every focusing light that that Dado has a corresponding parallel beam. In fact, some of them have 2 and 3, which represents the evolution that we've accomplished in a very short period of time. This is the newer version of the parallel beam intensifier for the Turbo 7. It's big, it's powerful. You could get quite a bit smaller one, but you won't get the same kind of light output. They like to call them, what was it? Oh yeah, I was going to say, when I first showed this to an old CBC guy in Winnipeg, his first comment was, wow, it's a magnifying glass. And I kind of laughed because in a way he's correct. However, it's not quite a magnifying glass because it increases the parallel property of the light. So it maintains the fact and puts, in fact, the lights, the difference between this light in full spot and this light in, I'll use this one actually because Barry's got it set up. Watch your eyes again over there. This is the DLED 10. You go into full spot. When you're using the parallel beams, adapters, you in fact put the beam in and you go to full flood. Not quite full flood on the LEDs, but you can actually see the difference. If you go to full spot, you'll see the LED kind of shows itself a little bit, but you back off slightly, and your eye can generally tell the difference between where the sweet spot of the light. You are actually increasing the output of the light, like was said in the video, but you're also enhancing the parallel beam effect with the light fixture. So you've improved it. My thinking the other day was it's less a magnifying glass and more, in fact, a light amplifier. An old audio guy talking. But in fact, that's what it's doing. It's sort of the reverse technology of what might be in a telescope or a binocular, right? A telescope and a binocular, what it does, it takes the light coming into the telescope, and what does it do? It amplifies it hugely to make whatever you're looking at bright. This is the reverse of that. What it's doing is it's taking the light that's hitting it and re-amplifying it to increase the brightness. You probably know this, however, obviously these parallel beam adapters only work on the Dedolight because they need the existing optics that exist inside the Dedolight. So that's kind of I want to say one other thing too. When you're considering light stream sources, there's two elements to consider, and I think Barry will get into that. It's not just the reflectors, okay? And so you need a certain amount of hardware. They're a little hardware heavy. And what I've been doing, people have been asking about starter kits. How do you get started with Lightstream? And what I've been suggesting is you don't go too heavy on the hardware when you first get involved with it. Play with the reflectors, see how you like to use them, and then you can go out and choose hardware. We sell hardware, but Manfrotto sells hardware, Avenger sells hardware. Hardware exists all over the place. The other thing to pay attention to is the only bit of hardware that is sort of our concept or that exists for us are the little locks, okay? They're proprietary development of Dado. There are other locks that will work with this bracket, but that's the one thing you have to. I've noticed in a couple of the starter kits, they give you a nice array of reflectors and only 2 locks. And that means, well, that's not true. You could use them by taping them up and putting them, leaning them against stuff, but you really need the locks to go with them. So that's sort of a technical overview of where we're standing with this. Any questions, just off the top? What I read in a book once was that I read a quote that said, light turns water into music, which I quite liked. And I think what you'll find here is that Lightstream turns light into magic. So not only is it green, not only is it flexible, you can use single sources a single light source can be turned into multiple light sources. You can use it in television studios, you can use it on location. Magnum PI uses the big PBD, the 70 that we saw in the Ad Astra film. They've got two sets lit with it. They roll it in its big case. They put it on the spike marks. They point it up at the reverse reflector. They turn it on, and boom, the whole set is lit. They don't even need two of the fixtures, because when they want to light the other set, they just roll it down the hall, put it in there, and turn it on. Very effective. I will say that when I read a certain broadcaster's last specification about the lighting they wanted to put in the studio, I was amazed at the amount of robotic fixtures that were asked for, which once again, back to the greening solution, how in our day and age, which it's important, the carbon footprint, I thought, why would you put half a dozen or 2 dozen robots on an anchor desk in a news station? You know, you could light it with 3 lights and a bunch of reflectors. They don't change their position, they just sit there. I know why they want the robots, but I think it's time to reconsider. So I'm going to turn this over to Barry, who is, after the technical stuff, he's going to show you what I mean when I say Lightstream can turn light into magic.
Cool. I'll take a moment just to swap over that laptop, actually. If anyone wants to take a, I guess, a washing break, now might be a good time.
Just one question. What about different sizes and shapes?
Sorry, I'll just get rid of this. Sorry, go ahead.
What about different sizes for the system as well as different shapes?
As the reflectors?
Yeah.
Okay, right now we have a 7 by 10 centimeter reflector, okay? We have the 25 by 25 centimeter reflector, which seems to be an industry standard. Most people like that size. We then have a a 50 by 50 centimeters, right? And then for the big film stuff that you saw, to work with the big parallel beam, there is actually a 1 meter square reflector, okay? Each of these, no, the 1 meter size comes with a number 1 on the front and a number 4 on the back, and that's it. The others all come 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a movement afoot. For instance, I've asked Dado to come up with something between the 7 by 10 and the 25 by 25, because I think that would be a good size. Easy to carry. It's going to give you a bit more spread than the smaller ones, and they're still very economical. The sizes between the 25, between the 50 and the 100, there are a few of those being added to the arsenal, but I think you're getting much bigger than this, and you're getting really into a film situation. Not so much film, big production, big crew, big hardware on the set. Big, so, okay? There are articulating arms. The ones that we have in here, I believe, are just a Manfrotto arm.
You know, just something that'll work onto the, so for example, where you had the thing in your handing it pointing by hand close to the light, if all of a sudden there's an articulating arm.
There's the lock.
Right.
So that receptacle will take all sorts of different industries.
If it were to fit in the same frame as your intensifier
Yes.
did, and then extend out into articulating arm, like a manipulating arm.
Yes.
And then you can turn around and have your reflector right then and there.
Yes, that's correct.
Almost like an umbrella holder on a yoke.
Yes,
Right.
that's right. In fact, you can also get little motors to run them too, in fact, which is essentially do the same thing, will move them. So yes, there's a lot of hardware that will work with them. You don't have any articulating arms you're using, I don't think, but.
I'll get one here.
And then you
Right.
get the flex arm over there.
That's the E-Flect, which is a different That's, once we get into hands-on, you can have a look at that. It was pretty self-explanatory.
Cool. So I guess most people are back, so I'll get started. So my name is Barry Cheong. I'm a freelance cinematographer based here in Toronto. And sort of the last couple of years, I've been starting to specialize in food and tabletop cinematography. So that's primarily been my focus and where I have used this system quite a bit up to this point. So as Terry and the guys over here at HG Source were prepping for this event, they kindly asked me to come and speak to you guys a little bit about my experience. So the plan is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my journey with reflected light, which, truth be told, is I think still in its kind of infancy. I know I'm still going through this process of figuring out where this system fits, what I like about it, and how to sort of utilize it in the work that I'm doing. So I'm going to show you a couple of behind-the-scenes photographs of some stuff I've done with various productions, as well as a 1-minute clip just compiling some of the work that I've done with the reflector system. My plan is to sort of keep the presentation really short, hopefully under 5 minutes, because I really think it's important for you guys to come up here, put your hands on the stuff, and start manipulating it and kind of seeing the results. It really is. You can sort of hear someone talk about it, and all the data is really great, but until you sort of played with it and tried it, it really sort of takes the experience to a different level. And that's kind of what happened to me. I sort of saw it, and it's only when I sort of mounted the reflector, put a light into it, and sort of played around with it that I sort of appreciated what it could do. So I will pull up my notes as well so I don't ramble on. So reflected light, like Terry mentioned as well, it's not a proprietary concept. We've all probably used reflected light at some point in our creative careers as cinematographers, as gaffers, as technicians, as image makers. Whether you have put a light into a piece of styro, a piece of foam core, you bounce light into a ceiling, you bounce on the wall, you bounce to muslin, whatever your choice flavor is, you use some kind of form of reflected light. And then generally, if you're going to that kind of technique, you're looking for kind of a softer sort of light quality. And there are sort of advantages of that and sort of challenges that come along with that as well. When it comes to hard light, we've typically taken a fixture, pointed it directly at what we're trying to illuminate, and then from there you are shaping it with flags and diffusion and other things to kind of get it to where you want it to be and at the quality that you were looking for. And that's sort of the way things have always kind of been done, partly by tradition, and that's how it's taught. And I think there are certainly lots of application where that still applies. And encourage you to sort of keep working that way if it's working for you. The only sort of exception of the rule that I could sort of think about, I'm sure there are many, is using mirrors. So if you've ever been outside, you've taken a 4x4 mirror board, you've redirected the sun to a more strategic position of where the sun is naturally being cast at the moment. That's sort of an example of sort of reflected light. And that's kind of how I kind of got into this world and this journey of exploring reflected light on a much smaller scale, but with mirrors. So I was doing a lot of tabletop work and going through the traditional methods of lighting that we spoke about. And then one day I just kind of was messing around with some small mirrors. So I had I think I had a little, I normally keep a little like makeup kit in my kit just in case I'm doing interviews or whatever. And I just happened to have this little compact mirror from the makeup kit. And we just kind of put it in there just to try it. And the response was overwhelming from the directors that I was working with, who are often actually still photographers that I'm working with, that are sort of making that leap into motion as directors now. And clients, clients would sort of look at their monitor in Video Village and just like, you could hear this like, from the other side of the room, this excitement as I started manipulating with these mirrors, and it really sort of evoked an emotional response, which I think is kind of important as well. It's really kind of, it's not necessarily what you're using, but kind of what it looks like and what that sort of conveys. And so for a while, actually, I should probably get to some of the photos here. So this is, can you bring that up? Yep. Oh, I guess I gotta drag that over to that. Going this way, going that way. Okay. So yeah, that's an example of just, some mirrors that I was using. So again, the bottom left one is just like a little makeup compact. And then I started just kind of randomly collecting different kinds of mirrors. I'd go to the dollar store, I would rifle my house, I would, find these different reflective surfaces and mainly mirrors and playing around with it. And so I did that for a while with quite a reasonable amount of success. And then at that point, I started to get into something called CRLS, which is what Terry mentioned. So it's a series of reflectors made by a company called Lightbridge, but with the same reflective qualities as Dedolight Lightstream. I believe actually all the surfaces are identical, minus I think the number 4 is slightly different that Lightbridge is doing. It's a little softer. But for all intents and purposes, what I'm talking about today and showing you as examples all apply to all the gear that is available here. And so I started using CRLS. So here's a couple examples of the reflectors now. And what the reflectors did do, because you could say, well, why can't I just go to the dollar store and get a bunch of mirrors and keep doing that? And you could. And by all means, I actually still use mirrors in my work. But what something like this gives you, it's a professional tool, and as such, it sort of gave me the ability to rig the reflectors in a way with common grip equipment. Otherwise, all the mirrors that I have either have Velcro on it, and I gotta clamp it with a Cardellini, and it works. But this system gives you a universal, standardized rigging point that terminates in a 750 or baby pin. So at that point, you can go to anything. And like Terry mentioned, there's an arsenal of stuff out there that you can use to rig the stuff. I find that using C-stands and a baby pin is the way I like to go about it. The C-stand is sturdy, so it's as you come up and play around with stuff, some of you probably will accidentally kick something, and that's kind of common, especially when you're working in tabletop where the space is very tight. And so I like C-stands because generally once you bag it, it's not going anywhere. And I also like it because I can loosen and lock an axis at a time. So what I like to do is grab the reflector by hand first, sort of figure out where my beam is coming from, and then put the reflector in the beam, kind of, while it's not rigged in anything, find what I like. And then from there, either with an assistant or myself, I can sort of gauge where the stand has to be, put it in, loosen all, 4 axes, because you got tilt on the head, you got pan in the arm, you got tilt on the knuckle on the stand, as well as the rotation of the reflector. Get it to where I roughly need to be with everything loose, and then slowly start locking everything one at a time. And what's great after the fact, if I need to trim anything, I just have to unlock one axis. If it's tilt, if it's pan, as opposed to a flex arm or something, you're trying to play all axes at the same time. It's almost like if you've ever worked the Ronin 2, the new Ronin 2, you can lock off each axis to balance the gimbal. It's the same idea. I can just trim the one thing without having to fight all the other axes. So rigging was a big thing, and also the different sizes of reflectors. I wasn't prepared to carry 25 different kinds of mirrors, and so this system gave me, in the case of CRLS, I started with a starter kit. So I started with 15 by 15 centimeter reflectors and 2 flavors of the 25 by 25. So, you know, having the different sizes gives you kind of, you know, ability to change the quality of the light systematically. It's like, okay, I need it to be a little harder, I need a little more spread, I need whatever. There, you have all those options as you start filling out all the various sizes and qualities of reflectors. Because you know, the aspect of beam spread and softness still applies here. The physics haven't changed. The bigger the reflector is, the more wrap it's going to have. It's no different than if this were, you know, a 6 by an 8 by, a piece of, you know, a 4 by 4 piece of styro. The same applications of softness apply. So thinking about reflectors and what size reflector you go with has that same sort of application. Okay, so yeah, so here's, so a couple examples of reflectors. So yeah, mainly rigged through on C-stands and baby pins. This is more stuff. And what's great is, you know, I think the important thing to remember here too is that it's the right tool for the right job. So I think I've heard of some people getting into, and I've talked to some people getting into maybe the system, and they have this feeling that they should be able to do everything they need to on a shoot with this thing. And there are certainly people in the world, some DPs in the world. Ian Murray is a DP in the UK that's really starting to push this stuff, and he's using it a lot. But even him, he's using, you know, he's still using kinofoil fixtures, he's still using other traditional methods. And that's kind of one of the takeaways I think I want to impart to you guys is like, look at this as just another paintbrush in your arsenal. You know, I still continue to use other methods as I need to, depending on what I'm doing, and using other traditional grip stuff. So an example here, you can see like a little cookie. So I wanted a little more textural effect out of the light. So I'm still using, you know, traditional grip gear. So as you can see, it can get pretty nutty. You know, this is actually done, and I'll show you an example just now, but this is actually done, like talking about Terry's point about efficiency. Most of what I'm doing now, tabletop, I'm doing it with no more than 2 fixtures. It's 2 lights lighting the entire thing, but I'm using like 6 or 7 reflectors. And truth be told, the second lamp is actually normally going through like an 8 by full grid cloth, normally gelled a little blue just to give me a little bit of fill in my shadows. But really the light hitting the reflectors is 1 light, and I'm just catching the beam with all these different reflectors of different qualities, of different sizes, to give me all the little hits that I want on the surface of food or product that I'm doing. So now talking about, just sort of repivoting and talking about the kinds of fixtures that you're putting into these reflectors. Like Terry mentioned as well, you know, reflected light is not, it's not a proprietary thing. This is not something that is exclusive to Dado and there's some secret sauce that's like, you know, in here and exclusive. Reflected light is a concept that has been around forever. So, you know, while the quality of optics does matter in a big way, actually, it really, depending on what you put, what kind of light you choose to put into the reflectors, will change the quality and output you get out of the reflector. On the flip side, as an entry point, you can kind of use anything, and you will get something coming off of it. And so, as a tool, and again, you know, Terry could probably speak about the cost, but relatively speaking, it's quite a cost-effective tool, I think. You know, if you're doing any sort of professional work, and so, you know, don't necessarily feel that maybe you have to have dado lights from the get-go. You can sort of get some reflectors, start playing around with them, and, you know, go from there. And that's kind of what I'm explaining to you, sort of my journey that I have sort of have gone through, and how, at my point now, I've been, you know, introduced more closely to what Dado is doing, and that's kind of my next step in my journey. But in this case, this was sort of in the early days, and I was putting a Fresnel into the reflectors. So what's interesting about this photo is just a way to rig this. So in terms of moving reflectors and lamps together. If like you need to move move that source, you can rig the reflector and the light off the same stand. So in this case, we have the Fresnel mounted at the bottom of a C-stand, pointing straight up, and off that same C-stand, off the arm and the head, is the reflector. So now, you've now got lamp and reflector locked into the same position. So if you're happy with that angle, you like the quality, you like the output you're getting from this combination of lamp to angle and reflector, but because of the shape on someone's face or whatever, you want to wrap it around a little bit more. You can pick up the whole thing, walk it over 2 feet, and now you've basically maintained everything else you've established up till that point. If it's on 2 stands, you're now moving the reflector, and then you have to refine the optimal angle of that beam. So that's kind of, if you sort of start using this stuff, that's kind of a great example of where that is. And yeah, I'll go back to that. Now, on talking about optics though, as you can see in that photo, we had to put a flag on top of the reflector. Because the Fresnel, is, while it's, it's focusable, it is a messier kind of beam. And so it's not going to be as clean as, say, something you're getting out of a dado fixture or a parallel beam adapter or a LECO or something like that. And so that's something, again, to consider and illustrative of the kind of light you put into it does sort of change your experience. So that's why we had kind of a flag there. So that's the same kind of setup there. Again, lamp into reflector is a single reflection, and then you can sort of move that around. And so moving on in my journey, from there I decided, okay, let's get into something different, and I started using LECOs. So a LECO, if you've ever used one, it's kind of a theatrical light by, I guess, by history. That's sort of where it came from. But it is a much cleaner beam. No hotspot, like a Fresnel. If you spot a Fresnel, you're gonna get a hotspot in the center. So much more even field, much more intense beam, because it gathers all that light and sort of spits it out for the same wattage. So actually, with the Fresnel and this LECO here, it's actually the same fixture on the back. It's an Aperture 120D, if you're just curious, with just a different piece on the front. And so I started using LECOs, and that really sort of killed a lot of the spill light that I was dealing with previously. So again, optics do matter. Moving forward, so this is an example of using the reflectors in kind of other applications. You might be asking yourself, well, I don't do a lot of tabletop. How can I use this? So I've been using it outside of tabletop, which has primarily been its use, but I've also used it a lot for backgrounds. I find it's a really great tool for backgrounds. If you're trying to create those sunny splashes, that feeling of motivated light from a window that is like the harder sunlight quality, I really have not found anything else that I personally like that has that same kind of quality. So this is just an example of using the reflectors. We were just, I think, lighting an interview thing and kind of creating some background splashes. So that's kind of there. This is another example here of, again, shooting an actor and needing a backlight. So I think we didn't have, I think we ran out of like small light fixtures, and we needed to get this sort of backlight on our actor. It was going to be in shot otherwise, so we didn't have an ability we didn't have like a 2K boom or something, or menace arm or something that had enough reach to keep the stand out of the shot while still getting the backlight in the position. We didn't have anything in terms of lighter fixtures that we could hang on this drop ceiling. So we put a reflector up there. The reflector, it weighs nothing. It's easier to rig. It's easier to manipulate. You don't have to deal with having to get power up to that lamp if you're hanging the lamp directly. You can do all of that work, electrical work, from the floor. So that's kind of an example there of that. And then this is just some of them, a job that I sort of did recently back in sort of tabletop world, with lighting a little surface. So this is kind of where I'm at now in terms of my journey in reflected light. using reflectors in combination with, normally in the case of tabletop, a softer source. And then I'll show you some examples just now of this actual job itself, some clips from it. So again, it's being done basically two fixtures, one behind an 8x and one for all the reflectors. And yeah, and then sort of for me next, it's really going to be looking at using dado fixtures more. I just purchased a DLED30 actually with a parallel beam adapter, and I'm going to be starting to incorporate that in the work I'm doing. Mainly because of the bicolor nature of it. Often I'm playing with that color contrast, so having that bicolor option on the fly, and also size. The Lico has been very effective, but it is a big fixture. When it's all said and done, it's a 2-foot fixture. So if you're trying to do stuff like that single rigging point off a light and reflector, that's going to be quite a bit more challenging to rig that light onto a C-stand and move that around. So I think it's again about the best tools for what you're doing, but that's kind of where I'm at this point. So again, just here's the single fixture, and then I'm basically just catching the beam with various size reflectors and qualities to get what I need. And then on that note, I will show you a clip of some stuff. So this is, how do I do this? I think I better go, which one am I dragging here? Let's do this. So this is like some example of some of my food cinematography, and again, done in that same approach, 2 lights, 1 through an 8x, and the rest is all done with reflectors. All right, so that's the clip. I guess I'll take any questions if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, I'll probably wrap this up and let you guys sort of come in here and play with this stuff. We've sort of set up a little bit of a mock tabletop thing here, so feel free to come and manipulate and move the stuff around as you need to. I do have an incident meter here with me if anyone's interested in taking light readings or doing any of that. I have a meter here, so that's accessible. And otherwise, we'll be just here taking questions. Yes?
So I have 2 questions. Have you tried doing slow motion cinematography with it? Does it work for that? Does it require light levels?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just the principles of quantity of light still apply here. So if you're doing, it depends on what frame rate you're buying and how much light you need in accordance. But the position of the reflector and what you put into the reflector, as long as you're getting what you need out of it, you can get it. So actually, a lot of that stuff was done at 60 frames, but I've done stuff up to 120 frames. Like, it depends on the camera, depends on the lens, depends on what stock.
The same amount of lights, or do you add more lights?
I've done, generally, in this case, it's always been 1 light, and I've been fine. This is all shot with an FS7 at probably 2.9 was the stop. So I've been okay with what I've been doing, but it's very easy to put 2 fixtures into the same reflector because it's not a mirror, because it's just slightly off a mirror. Probably with a number 1, you might have some issues with double reflection, but certainly as you get to number 2 reflector, at that point it homogenizes the light enough that you don't get, even though it's too thick, 2 lamps into it, you're not getting double shadows anymore, which is kind of great. So, yes.
Have you ever, like in the video, have you ever any interviews people with the system?
I haven't. Again, I've used it a lot for backlights, backgrounds, different effects. Like if you just kind of want to feel like a little sun splash is raking someone's body, I've done that kind of stuff. As far as a key light goes, I haven't. Just because, again, like I mentioned, like the rules of softness still apply. And so, you know, even I've got a set of 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter reflectors, but that still will never be as soft as if you're used to lighting something with like a 6 by or an 8 by or something like really big, you know, or a 7-foot octave. Like you're not going to be able to achieve that same level of softness just because the size is different. You know, the same qualities of wrap apply. So yeah, so traditionally I've still been keying people with the traditional methods. Yeah.
When we were talking, you mentioned that there's specific reflectors that you like and would prefer to have more of than others.
Right.
Which ones are those and why? And sizes as well.
Right. So for tabletop, I've been using 1s and 2s the most. You know, I like the sun splash quality that I'm getting onto 1s and 2s. You know, I generally will never go to a 3, and I almost never use the 4 because the 4 is basically like styro. So at that point, because of size, you know, talking about reflected, you know, bounce light kind of being a similar methodology. You know, if you're using bounce light, you probably you're wanting something softer. In which case, you want to probably bounce into something bigger. So at that point, I'm going to a 4x4 piece of styro or something if I'm looking for that quality. So the 1s and 2s are something that I'm finding I can't recreate necessarily the same quality as it with a direct light. So I'm using 1s and 2s a lot. And I'm using, for tabletop, I'm using the smaller ones. In the case of Lightbridge, it's 7 centimeters by 7 centimeters. But I am looking at getting a couple of these 7x10s because it gives me a bit of a different shape. And I'm using so the smaller ones and the next size up, which is 15 by 15, which is which Lightbridge has in their system. I guess at some point Data will be adding it to theirs as well. Yeah. Any other final questions? That was good. Cool. Well, thanks for everyone for coming. I think Terry's still around. I'm going to be hanging around. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Cool. Thank you.